reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker, but I wasn't expecting that kind of police presence. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jo Heathcote. I've been teaching in Manchester since about 1842. And I was principal examiner for GCSE English Literature and part of the development team for the new spec. Some of you might recognise me from Pixel, if you've ever been to Pixel conferences. And I'm here today because I've written this tiny little book for HarperCollins called Enriching English, Curriculum with Soul. And I'm going to weave that in a little bit as I talk to you today. We are sort of in the reaches of a political conference. So I want to begin today by just thinking about the state of the nation in terms of English and where we're up to. And it was the state of the nation that inspired me, actually, or made me want to write that little book. I was chatting to a colleague quite recently who said, do you know what we need in English? We need better PR. We need better PR. Quite often students are steered into the glossy subjects, the STEM subjects, the big juggernaut of STEM rolls into town. And we're all probably very conscious, and probably in higher education as well, conscious of the decline in A-level English, in A-level subjects. Harrowing statistics, really, decline of up to 35%. Language has been particularly hit. I think Marcello and I met many years ago discussing A-level English language. It's been particularly hit. And yet that was the exciting new subject after Curriculum 2000. Langlit was one of my all-time favourite courses to teach at A-level and seen a massive decline from over 16,000 entries down to 7. And I used to love teaching that course because I used to feel like I got all the really quirky students in the classroom for Langlit. It was like, all right, you know, if you want to be a medic, you go off and do whatever. If you want to dye your hair pink, you do A-level at Langlit. So, you know, that's one of the kind of things that was really in the forefront of my mind, is that decline in A-level. And why has it come about? Is a question I think for us all to ponder today. Why are we seeing that decline? We might say it's the examination treadmill. We might say it's the decline in coursework, which for me is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking and biggest mistakes in terms of the way that we assess English. I personally think it's our single greatest loss at Key Stage 4. That we're now assessing creative writing in an exam in 45 minutes instead of giving students the time to develop and flourish as creative and imaginative writers. But I also find it a little bit soul-destroying when I hear colleagues saying, oh, the curriculum is really restrictive, it's not engaging, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And I think days like today are fantastic for us to really take stock of that and really think about it and get excited with colleagues. Because we have got it within our capacity to be the absolute opposite of that. The curriculum doesn't have to be restrictive. It doesn't have to be unengaging. It's within our power to change it. And I want us to think about maybe what the opportunities are today for us to change, enrich, and deliver an English curriculum that has real soul. In the book, I give a little exercise for you to do, which is to go away and look at national curriculum. Sounds fun, doesn't it? I clearly need to get out of it. But if you look at national curriculum, schemes of work, history, oh my word. Start in the Middle Ages, Battle of Hastings, like move on a bit, Henry VIII, all the wives, move on a bit later on, like what's going on, like Victoria, this battle, that World War. My goodness, the fancy dress options are incredible. Science, when they put the science curriculum together, just flip It's about 32 pages long. There's absolutely everything in there. Year 7, cure some like world diseases. Year 8, send a rocket to the moon. Year 9, dissect Brian Cox. It's all in there. Then you turn to English and you have a look at our subject content. Do it. It might be a little while since you've done it, but have a look at it, honestly. I don't know who did it. It might have been a junior minister at the time who'd been out the night before, coming with a raging hangover, been out partying with Michael. Or, in my vivid imagination, it was an English teacher who'd been roped in, having spent 3 days on the Year 7 getting to know each other out the band trip. Like that. Oh my God. Because when you look at it, honestly, look at it with a bit of a subversive eye. It says, reading. Yeah, do some. Poetry, prose, drama, yeah, all that. Can I think of any authors? Yeah, Shakespeare, put him in it, do 2. Seminal world literature, all that, just do it. Writing, yeah, plenty of writing. Bit of speaking and listening, yeah. Came in on day 2, saw the scientists next door in their goggles. What are they doing to Brian Cox? Wrote a glossary. God, I get some English stuff in here somewhere, and that's it. Now, I think, in some respects, my take on that, call it naughty if you like, is I could do what the bloody hell I like at Key Stage 3, actually. Could do whatever I like. In fact, it almost gives us too much choice. And that in itself can be a little bit problematic. Sometimes when I've been doing consultancy work in schools and I have a look at a Key Stage 3 curriculum with colleagues, and I'd ask you just to maybe be critical friends to each other today. Am I leaning into this microphone too much? Am I really nervous?
No, you're all right.
Just realised I'm like this, like with the O2. It can be quite overloaded. I see it very often, that there's so much in there, and I often say to heads of English, well, how do you get through this? And they go, oh, well, maybe we don't. Maybe we don't. We don't always get through it. Maybe there's too much in there. You know, does your Key Stage 3 curriculum maybe look a little bit like your degree course in some respects? Maybe have a think about that with a critical eye. Now, I've got nothing personally against old white men. I've got one at home. I love him dearly. But in terms of our reading choices, again, I've seen quite a lot of Key Stage 3 English curriculum that is just full of the old white men. And our choices in formulating the curriculum, they have consequences. They have consequences for our students, they have consequences in terms of whether they love or hate reading. And I was so lucky to work with Jamila and Joanne. You can have a look at some of our resources here through our eyes and who we are. It's coming out of the missing pages report at Teach First, that kind of harrowing statistic that, you know, it's like a statistic, wasn't it, from a persuasive writing essay by one of our students. 98% of English teachers think the curriculum is not diverse enough. It's like one of those bonkers statistics that our students write. It was a real statistic. So I might ask you to think today about what text did you do at school? What did you study? And does that impact on what you put on your curriculum? What do you read yourself personally? And does that impact on what you put on your curriculum? Who are your favourites? And does that necessarily mean that they would be the favourites of your students or the kinds of text that your students would read? And when we put together the anthologies up here of the diverse texts, we worked in a little team of 5 or 6 of us. Oh my goodness. Kathy Collins, who's not come today because of the train strike, she did like the spreadsheet from hell. Now, I'm personally allergic to spreadsheets, but we ended up with so many suggestions of text that we could use. It was actually difficult when we did the first edition to restrict ourselves to 24 texts by a diverse collection of authors. So then we had to do another one for Key Stage 4, and we've just recently finished one for Key Stage 5. So that was 72 different texts that we had no problem curating, and so many that we've had to miss out. So I would ask you to just think about how important it is to include a diverse selection of texts in your Key Stage 3 curriculum. Have a think about when you last went into a big bookshop and stood in the young adult section. Do we always have to teach the old white guys? Are they somehow, do they have this reputation that they are of value and that anything recent and modern is not of value? I'm lucky in the sense that I've got a 14-year-old who her idea of a treat is to go stand in the young adult section of Waterstones. I mean, a bit of a surprise for my 40th, but I wasn't expecting her, but she's got her, she's got her uses. So I often spend time looking at young adult fiction. Maybe after the conference today, if you can get across the barricades, then maybe pop in and just think, actually, what could we introduce at Key Stage 3 that's new, that's different, that hasn't been done before? I'm always available for writing schemes of work, by the way, in the spare time. So, have a think about that. I love discovering new authors. One of my probably biases is that I read a lot of contemporary women's fiction, and I rarely read books by male authors. So I was really I discovered this book by Caleb Azume Nelson. He wrote Open Water last year, and it absolutely blew my mind when I read it, and I thought, oh God, I had that feeling in my heart like when I first discovered The Great Gatsby when I was 17. And so I read this book last year, Open Water, and I just read the sequel to it, Small Worlds, this time. And that feeling when you discover a new author that you can then take to your classroom. And I don't know how the slide thing's going, but may I read a little section?
You go for it. This.
I'm just going to throw this out there and say, I discovered this young black British writer, he's 27, which breaks my heart because I'm 56, otherwise he might need a restraining order because he's beating a path to his door. And it was love at first paragraph. Do you know that feeling? Love at first paragraph. It's like, oh, Caleb, where have you been all my life? Imagine this when you're teaching for the GCSE language papers, whichever spec you do. It's the last day of school. The air vibrates with something large and unknown, something which shimmers and shines, something which excites and terrifies. It's our final assembly. A teacher had stood and insisted this was not the end, but the beginning, that we had the rest of our lives ahead of us. And from this moment, anything was possible. Though we're young and often so sure we know what we want, sure we know ourselves, these moments are sobering. In the times we didn't know ourselves, we always had each other. When faced with the unknown, we could lean back into the familiar, knowing each other's hearts, knowing each other's intimacies. So knowing how valuable that is, we all insist once more that we'll link up, that we'll keep in touch, that the only thing between us is love. After we've scribbled messages into yearbooks, after the frantic energy of not wanting to let go of each other begins to settle, Dell and I, it's the girl he falls in love with, Dell and I find ourselves in our usual spot on the edge of the school fields. I discard my tie as a slow bead of sweat darts from my forehead, blesses the grass. Dell has rolled up her blazer like a pillow, inviting sunshine to graze her face. A tiny portable speaker tries its best with Kind of Blue. Where it fails, we fill in the gaps, knowing the record so well, knowing the beautifully odd notes, the flourish of an extended solo, the mastery of it all. And that every little chapter is like a vignette into growing up, and they're the kinds of things that you can discover and maybe bring to your own students, if I could encourage you to do that today. One of the titles of our anthologies here is Who We Are. And I'd like to finish by asking us to reflect on who are we? Who are we as English teachers, as practitioners? I was in a meeting with an academy trust the other day, and I was speaking to the chief executive, and he said, oh, it's always the English teachers, isn't it? It's always the English teachers. When I speak to head teachers, it's always the English teachers. And I said, oh, do you mean the ones who say, yes, but English isn't like that? When they try to bring in a new exam or a new way of assessing or whatever. I said, yes, we are the thorns in your side, aren't we? We're the thorns in your side, and we have to be. We have to be. If you didn't make your way through the thorns, you'd never smell the roses. I reference in my little book here the reasons why I became an English teacher. And I refer to my English teacher, who was called Vanda Simmons, 1980s Clegg-Heaton, which wasn't anywhere near Miles Platting, but it was in the arse end of Yorkshire. And Vanda used to say to us, there's all human life in an English lesson. All human life. There's history, there's politics, there's sociology, there's science, there's psychology, there's ethics, there's philosophy. You don't just teach English, you teach all human life. It changes lives, as we've heard from Lou, and I'd like you all to just think, what was that moment? What was that defining moment for you where you thought, I want to be an English teacher. I'm going to be an English teacher. English is important. We might not have the PR of the STEM subjects, but we are a touchstone for emotional intelligence, for critical thinking, for political awareness. And today, in our kind of post-truth, homogenized society, I think those things are the most important things of all. Think about what you're teaching in your curriculum. Think about what's in your Key Stage 3. Think about what you can do to Key Stage 4 so that your students want to continue into A-level and higher education. Because who'll be sitting here teaching English tomorrow if we don't? If A-level continues to decline? Who'll be our poets? Who'll be our novelists? Who'll be our journalists, bringing us the truth? Who'll be our wordsmiths if we don't cultivate them? Who will tell the stories? And what stories will they tell? I can leave you with one message today. Teach English from your heart. Teach it from your soul. Thank you.
If this book is anything like that talk, then I'm thinking it could be incredible. So it's called Enriching English Curriculum with Soul, a practical guide for English teams and leaders by Joe Heathcote, available through Collins. So do check it out.